نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلنا في قرية من نبي إلا أخذنا أهلها بالبأساء والضراء لعلهم يضرعون وقال أيضا ادعوني أستجب لكم وقال أيضا يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الدعاء هو العبادة وقال أيضا الدعاء سلاح المؤمن أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In today's get together, we are talking about why the world goes through hard and severe times and what is the solution to these hard times and things related to the topic, such as how the prayers of the believer offer a certain character. What effects do they have is what we will focus on in today's lecture. My dear believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this world and made it colorful, but this world has its own dichotomies. Sometimes the times are good, sometimes bad, sometimes there is happiness, sometimes sadness, sometimes health, and sometimes illness, sometimes comfort, sometimes discomfort and trouble, sometimes glad tidings, etc. In short, the world is a collection of contradictory things. Here, man is faced with different circumstances, but because the world is a mortal place, therefore nothing is permanent here. The situation of things keeps changing on a day-to-day basis, just like the weather changes every day. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot. Similarly, even the lives of the people, there is constant change, and this change keeps happening. When man stops fulfilling the commands and obligations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he begins to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he becomes a victim of excessiveness, moves away from the straight path or path of truth, then he is put to trials, such that he refrains himself from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he becomes as per the will of Allah and puts his life back on the practice of Quran and Sunnah. The ayah I had read in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send a prophet to people, and if the people disobeyed and they would not walk on the path the prophet would tell them to, would turn their faces away from the message of truth and the highest of messages, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put those people in harsh times, trials and tribulations, and they are caught for the misdoings, such that he cries, repents, and begs for forgiveness for his sins before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes even believers are put through tough times to test their faith and shape them well. So they are put in the furnace of trials, and their belief shapes up beautifully. That he went through the trials with patience, proved himself to remain steadfast in faith, or did he fail in showing steadfastness and was lacking firmness in faith? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this in the Quran too. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَالنَّقْشٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. When trials and tribulations come on people and people beg for their forgiveness, remain steadfast on faith, they try to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this calamity becomes a source of comfort and rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if those group of people who, despite the difficult times by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, continue their ignorance, continue their disobedience, continue their old ways, remain far from the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then these trials become a source of great and severe trials. They become the center of the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Epidemics and ailments are sent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are a ni'mah for the people, just like health and well-being is a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, diseases and sickness too are a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a different subject out of human nature. People do not like diseases and illness. Even in the hadith, it is mentioned that a believer's affairs are a unique matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with a rare and unique ability that if he makes sabr and forgiveness in difficult times, these difficult times too become a rahmah for the person. And if a person is blessed with health, happiness, glad tidings, good circumstances and good situations, if the person makes shukr, then this too is a big blessing for him. That this too is like having both your hands full in blessings. This is why sickness and illness too is a big blessing for the believer. When a situation comes where the world is afflicted with disease and illness, what has Sharia asked us to do? Sharia has said, ask for guidance, and has also given its treatment. My dear members, dua holds a big importance in Sharia. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran, Ad'awni astajib lakum. Make dua to me and I will answer them. In the hadith, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam salatu salam has said, Ad-dua wal ibadah. That dua is the highest of ibadah. It is the real ibadah. In another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam salatu salam has mentioned dua is the weapon of the believer. Ad-dua uthilahul mu'min. In short, for a believer, dua is a precious, unmatched and important gift. In any situation and circumstance, a man cannot be cut off from dua. Dua is an ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the pious and the prophets, sahaba and awliya, dua has been an important attribute of them. It has occupied a large portion of their lives. In the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dua, it is the most honorable gift. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, above dua, there is nothing more honorable. Dua is an amal greatly liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said in the hadith, the one who does not make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he puts his wrath on him and gets angry at him. We must know that from the qudrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dua is a very big gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is why silahul mu'min, or the weapon of the believer, has been said to it. It means just as a person can protect himself and ward off an attack from him, similarly, dua also protects you from problems, diseases, sickness. Dua protects you from evils. In a nutshell, dua is an extremely important ibadah. Therefore, in such severe trials and times of sickness and disease, We should focus ourselves completely towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do so with focus, perseverance and persistence. We must occupy ourselves with dua and make lots and lots of dua so that the severe trials that we are facing today, they should go away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the ability to get involved in His dua and protect us from these severe trials. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.